The question is the piece finished or are you finished?
Anything I add to it just seems to change it for the negative.
I was just drawing and I got into flow state, but just enjoying myself.
It's not just about the final image, it's about the process, isn't it, a lot of the time?
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Sketchwave, our weekly show where we talk all things digital art, Procreate, and today I am joined by probably Procreate's royalty. I've got the one and only James Julier, and we are joined by ArtwithFlo. I'm also here as well. Flo, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us for a
Yeah,
full episode this time.
yay! Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing fine. I'm just happy to be here. This will be fun.
Absolutely.
Just the three
James,
of
how
us
have you been?
together.
Yeah, it's going to be chaos. There's going to be voices overlapping in this episode. It happens when it's just the two of us. There's going to be a lot more of it, isn't it? Yeah, it's been good. I'm finally kind of sorting my studio out a little bit, although the lighting is a bit weird at the moment. But yeah, we're getting there. I'm settling in. I might have to add a bit of glamour and colour like you two have got in your backgrounds, but mine's a bit stark and a bit minimal right now. But we'll get there. We'll get there.
Flo's come very prepared this week. She's showing me up with my
Yeah.
background as well, got the bright lights as well. How's your week been, Flo? What have you been getting up to this week?
Yeah, just the regular stuff,
Yeah.
work, creating, doing sports, and I participated in a pub quiz. It was a special Amsterdam pub quiz because Amsterdam is like its anniversary, 750 years of Amsterdam. So
Oh,
I
wow.
joined a pub quiz, but we ended up second. So yeah,
Wow.
didn't win anything, but it was a fun night. Yeah,
That's all that matters.
That's awesome.
I
Well,
like a
this
little
week's
competition.
yes, absolutely. Now, this week's episode, we are going to do it in our typical fashion. We've got a talking point at the very beginning, and then we are going to roll into another kind of main subject, really, where we're going to take a look back at a few of our Halloween themed designs. We're in October now. It's good to look back at a few of our designs and also maybe hint at a few of the ones we've got coming out as well. I'll leave chapters in the description down below so you can jump ahead to different sections if that's what you want to do. But our main talking point came from a user on my Discord, and they asked me a question that really stuck with me. I thought, who best to ask other than you two as well, is how to actually end an art piece and what to do to be satisfied with it. Because I think this can be broken down into lots of different elements. And I think for us, we have a certain limitation almost where we've got the recording. The recording is it. And then I know James doesn't. Flo, do you ever record something and then ever sort of maybe jump back into a recording to add a little bit or change something at the end?
No, I never jump back in, but sometimes I do feel bad. Well, not bad, but I feel like, maybe I should have changed this a little bit. But then I get all like, I don't know, if I keep recording, then it won't be as clear anymore, the tutorial. If I start doing little things, little
Yeah.
tweaks, and I want to keep the tutorial clear. So sometimes I do feel like, oh, maybe I should head back in, but no, once the video is has ended, then the art piece is finished.
Yeah.
So that was my first thought actually when you asked this question. Once the tutorial is finished, you're done. Then your art piece is finished. That's that's the easy way.
Always. That is always the case. I always feel like you finish and maybe you see something and then you go,
Yeah.
I'd love to have changed that. So I think we can come at it from two different angles. We've got the creator side of it and also our if we were to create just a piece on our own. James, how do you feel about when a piece is actually finished? Well, first of all, do you ever feel like a piece is ever finished?
It does, yeah. There are pieces that I would say I've finished. And aside from the tutorial stuff, it tends to be you just run out of steam with it. I think, you run out of enthusiasm and you think that anything you're doing at that point is actually detrimental to the piece. When you've run out of things
But
that
then
you can do.
the question is the piece finished or are you finished?
Well, I'm finished, yeah.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah. But then, you could return to it later, but I tend to find with a little bit of distance on something, returning to it just doesn't work the same. Apart from my tutorials that I do extended versions, but the actual like proper artwork that I do just for the fun, if I come back, I say like a year later or something like that, it just I'm a different person, therefore it feels like sacrilege to start undoing where I was in that point in time when I created it the first time, I think. So I prefer to start a new project usually.
Flo, do you ever feel like a piece could be finished?
No, just that I'm finished. Like usually I just stop when
Yeah.
I'm sick of the piece and I don't feel like continuing. And I have loads of like personal artworks that I've never finished that are definitely, even in your opinion, if you would look at it, you'd say, no, that's not finished because I just get tired of it. So yeah. I just usually I'm and just like James said, I don't feel like going back in there, even if it's definitely not finished. I still don't feel like going back. I always enjoy the first part of the
Yeah.
creation process the most, like sketching, figuring out colors, composition, and then really the rough phase. I enjoy that, but then the
Yeah.
whole fine tuning and rendering, that's the least exciting part because in my head it's already finished and polished, but then I need to do the work
Yeah.
and then I just don't feel like doing that. So yeah. And I don't make a lot of personal work.
I don't think you'd finish a recording either, would you? If you weren't yet finished or satisfied with it, I think we would all get to the point where we could take a look at it, maybe in our recording for just a minute, and go, "No, do you know what we achieved? What we tried to achieve here? We can now wrap it up with the outro of our videos." Kind of. I think
Yeah.
we know we would get to that point quite easily.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how you work, but I usually already have like this step by step process in my head. I'm everything is laid out, so I know when the last part of the piece is and when it's finished. So there's not a lot of guessing anymore at the end. It's just the last part. Okay, we're finished, and this is it. So I need to figure out
Yeah.
when I'm finished before I start recording. So it's a whole different way of working.
I think a piece, you can definitely sort of step away from a design. I think if we're talking about not tutorials as such and us in our creative sort of processes, I think if you were to draw something, and you especially if you really enjoyed where the concept was going, and you put, maybe let's say you in your mind you're like, now this is 60% done, even though it might be pretty much there at the finish line. It depends on, I guess, where your imagination wants to take it. Like, how far does your imagination want to populate every single corner of the design? Are you happy to leave the distant objects, if that's part of the design, very simplistic, or do you really want to detail heavily into the background? And if it's rolling hills, do you want to add a church back there or a small village? All these types of things you could possibly integrate, but ultimately, a lot of the time, I think some people overlook the fact that most of the time, your subject area, your main focal point of the design, put your time and effort into that. And I don't think you need to populate the whole of the design. Leave it, keep it simple, and nod towards the fact that they are rolling hills in the background in that example again. But make sure that your focal point, whatever it may be, that's where you put all your craft and your love to. If you over detail it and you come back to it as well, and then you start adding more stuff into the detail, you can actually take away focus from your subject as well,
Yeah,
which
feels
ultimately
stale,
can act as a distraction.
at that point. It always comes across as stale additions. It's not got the vibrancy of that first time when you're creating something. I think that, and I find this with my extended versions too, is that I try to revisit it, and thankfully it's only been a couple of days, and normally I'm time pressured because, unlike you two, I'm not very well organized. So it tends to be I run out of time on the day I need to upload. That's the reason that it reaches a full stop. But if I've have any distance away from it other than a couple of days, anything I add to it just seems to change it for the negative. It's a strange process, isn't it? I think that things become a little capsule of time, don't they? And any additions that I make afterwards just seem like stale and don't actually feel creative anymore. It just feels like technical tweaks and changes that don't really add anything interesting to
Yeah.
the image.
Yeah, and it can be handy. What I used to do is just duplicate either the layer, if it's just one layer, or duplicate the entire project and then start
Yeah,
refining things if you feel like you're in that phase where it's almost finished. And then you can just compare and check, did this add anything? Did it get better or not? Or should I stick with the first version? Because otherwise, if you work in your project and you haven't like saved it in Procreate, duplicated it, then it's then it's gone.
This is a
So,
video
yeah.
I want to make, like a topic really of how people can better utilize Procreate to do certain things like this. For example, and we could make a full conversation out of another time as well. But even just small things like if I create a group for the foreground elements, for example, but in my practices prior, if I think about, well, actually, could I do this instead? I'll duplicate that group. I always call it BU, the original one, and just turn it off and leave it so it's backup and it's always available in my layers. And I can go back and compare the two differences and see if the direction I was going in had of any value to the design, or did I prefer the original one? And sometimes that can just be as simple as experimenting with different brushes for textures on like a tree, for example, and just messing around without destroying, as you said, kind of your main design, making sure that you've duplicated certain elements, whether it's a group, a layer, a whole canvas, a whole project, and then making sure you can at least jump back into where you were. One question I want to sort of jump into here, because you mentioned about process. Me and James, we have different processes. We've spoke about them before, that I will draw something in my spare time, and then I will, once I'm finished with it, I'll go back through all the steps. I'll take screenshots on my iPad, which are my steps that I then follow when I then sit down to record it. So I'm drawing it then for a second time. James wakes up when the sun comes up, has a coffee, runs straight to his iPad and starts drawing on a Sunday morning.
Really?
Listen, just leave the man to his methods.
It is nightmarish.
Wow. But do you ever mess up?
Well, I did last week. Wow. Well, that was a technical issue. It wasn't.
But did you ever mess up? Like you're not happy with your painting?
I suppose that they don't always go 100%. I tend to feel like that and then step back, and after a day or two, I think that actually you take on a different perception of it somehow as well. I think you can be very critical and not like something, but actually with a little bit of distance from it, you can appreciate what has been successful in it. So I've never had a tutorial I've had to scrap in that situation. No.
You never had a total screw up?
No, not really. I mean, there are some that I don't like as much. Certainly, I think there are weaker ones, but they've all reached a conclusion and been uploaded as tutorials. And, there's been one or two that I look back and think, well, blimey, clearly the energy wasn't there, and that's not a good one. But yeah, I think it depends on. I tend to do good preparation in terms of finding references and finding the inspiration to start with. So as long as I know what I'm aiming for as an image, then that's fine. As long as it gets 80% of where I'm imagining it's going to go, then by hook or by crook. What I do find is that the steps are sometimes a bit convoluted instead. It's not that the image is. It's not that I don't like the image. It's more I don't like the way I got there than anything else.
So maybe if you would do it a second time, you would change the steps or the process.
That's it. Yeah.
That's why, just like you, I paint or draw everything twice, except for like realism videos I do at Patreon. Then I just have like a reference image. I show that, and then I take patrons through the process of painting from a reference. But for all of my YouTube tutorials, I draw or paint it twice, or sometimes even 3 times.
Gosh.
And while I just sit on my couch and come up with an idea for a tutorial, I already think about what steps I could use, what would be the most logical way to create it. And then I try to remember that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's harder. And I pick my colors, I make a color palette, and I try to I usually pin my brushes that I've used. Like in Procreate, you can pin those in the most recent used brushes. So I pin those, so I'll remember what brushes I've used, and then I start recording. I don't have any screenshots. I just have my final piece, so I know where I'm going, and then I'll remember the steps that I've taken, and that's how I do it.
I think after doing, I don't know how many tutorials you've done now, Flo, but with your Patreon and your YouTube and anywhere else, you must have done hundreds and hundreds, and and who knows how many now.
I think 400 or 500. I don't know.
So you build an intuition. Sometimes you can look at an idea, a reference image you found, and you say, well, I'm going to go for something like that, and you can see the structure in front of you. You can already plan ahead, looking at it, you know what you're going to have to do for the most part. It doesn't always pan out quite how you would imagine sometimes, does it? And that's where I would probably do better
Yeah.
to be better organized. But for me personally, I find that, and I was a teacher in the classroom, and there'd be so many times that I had to explain things and kind of wing it and just in the spur of the moment have to figure it out, and didn't have the opportunity to plan ahead. And I think that's the energy I've brought to the channel as well.
Yeah. For me, it's already stressful enough to do the recording. It gets better over the years, but
Yeah.
I guess it's it's more difficult for me because I need to speak in English. Perhaps if I would do it in Dutch, it would be easier to just wing it. But
I think so. Yeah. Perhaps
I
that's
need to
it.
come prepared.
Yeah, I get that.
I find the process is fascinating. I just think it's so interesting that everybody, sometimes we can have a little bit of everybody sort of flavor of process in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, the thought of me going into a recording without my screenshots, I'm like, only because my brain is like a sieve. I'll have forgot what brushes, what opacity, what size maybe. That's sometimes to the degree that I will go down to just to remember. But of course we can do things like put a marker for the opacity. So I know when I come back to that brush the next time, those markers refer to certain elements in the design. But that was done in, like you say, the first time. And again, I'm similar that sometimes it will be a second time I'll draw it before a recording. So the recording ends up as the third time. That to me sometimes only happens if I was just drawing and I got into flow state, but just enjoying myself. And once I came up with a design that I really enjoyed, I'm like, wait, how did we get here now? And now I have to go backwards and be like, right, okay, let's now do it again. But so that at least I understand it. And then when it comes to the recording, you can at least attempt to get somebody else to understand it as well. So yeah, I love the processes. I think it's absolutely fascinating to see that YouTube can be so different.
I need a short period of time. But in between the first time I created it and the recording, preferably just a day or something like that. So I still remember. If a week has passed, then I need to do it another, like a second time before I start recording, because then I don't remember the steps anymore.
I mean, I've asked Joel this before. When you've done a version of it and then you do the recording, do you find sometimes that you preferred the practice version more than the recorded version?
Almost all the time.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
Yeah. It never turns out the way that I really intended it. It's always a bit different, and it's fine. Yeah. It still looks fine, but yeah, I usually prefer the practice piece because then I'm more relaxed, and I experiment more, just messing around.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Do
definitely.
you have to have the same conversation that I have to have with myself, where I go, nobody's ever seen the one that's on your iPad the first time. So they've only seen the second version. So it'll be as magical to them as the other version is to you. That's what I have to say to myself every time.
But sometimes I do think that it would be good to actually share it, because perhaps people feel insecure about their result, that it's not exactly the same as what I've created. But mine isn't exactly the same as what I've created either.
Yeah,
so,
it's true. Yeah.
Maybe it would be nice.
That's a great idea. I love that idea.
I think it would be a comfort for people.
I think so.
Oh, yeah. 100%. I think also like just things that we can't actually factor into the video as such, whether it's like pressure sensitivity of a brush, that everybody's pressures will be slightly different and they'll end up with different results from the brushes. So all of those miniature factors in there, as well as the general full image at the end, everybody's is going to look different. And I actually say that quite a lot in my videos, that don't worry about following my tree, branch for branch. Draw your own tree. Everybody's is going to look different. And I say that all the time, and I try to emphasize it more, that that's fine. Like our tutorial sometimes can just be a goal, and a wide goal at that. When you're drawing it, if you think that you would like to introduce, a rabbit hole right next to the base of the tree, go for it. Introduce whatever element you want in there, and then, take it in the direction you want. I'm just here to guide you through the steps. Give some entertainment for an hour or two. And I think that can always be fun.
I love it when I see people do that, just add their own elements or change the colors and just go wild with the design. I think that's great.
Do you ever
I
see?
saw just before James. I saw someone actually merge our tutorials together
really?
today on
Oh,
Facebook.
really?
It was I did
That's
a
so cool.
porthole design, and then they put a design of yours on the inside,
Right.
which was a ship on the ocean. And I've actually
Right.
seen people. This was a couple of years ago now. The porthole and then a mix with one of yours, Flo, as well. So I think certain things like a framed kind of element, like a porthole, can work really well of just layering it with another
Yeah.
piece, and then you combine two artists work together. I think that's a really cool idea. Nice little collaboration kind of concept.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, James, I interrupted you.
Okay, I was a side issue. I was going to ask: have you ever seen people post versions of your tutorials and been convinced that they've just reposted your version because they've done such a good job of it? I mean, I find that sometimes I have to like really
Uh,
compare, really look at like, have you done
yeah,
that, or is
well,
that just my?
I've had it happen that people actually did post my work
Yeah.
as if it was a tutorial result. So yeah,
Yeah.
in that case, I really had to compare. I was like, yeah, no, this is definitely just my work. But yeah, I've had it happen in a positive way as well. Or sometimes even I looked at results and I was like, wow, this is better than what I
Yeah.
came up with.
Yeah.
Some people really take it to the next level. So
Yeah.
that's really nice.
That is nice to see.
That's always an interesting question when somebody does that and you see it and it looks amazing. You go, what brush did you use for the grass? And you're like, I'm definitely using that next time. Something like that. And you're like, yeah, who's teaching who at this point? But it's good though, because everybody will have their own little flavor, like we were saying, and they can you can learn from everybody's all the time, which is just awesome.
Yeah.
I just want to talk about sort of workflow quickly. How many videos do you typically record in a week then?
Typically 3 or 4.
Wow. Okay. So is that usually so in terms of workflow, me and James, like we were saying, like James tends to record on the Sunday. It goes out on the Sunday. I will tend to record if it's YouTube 2 weeks in advance. Patreon. James, I recorded a tutorial this week, but it's not that I'm prepared that far ahead, but it comes out in January. So, and when I was yeah, when I was putting it in my calendar as to where it was going to go, I was like, I'm definitely telling James about this 4 months ahead.
Just showing off.
But how far typically are you in advance of your kind of releases?
I try to be 3 weeks in advance, 3 or 4 weeks, sometimes even more if I want to take a long break. So yeah, that's why I need to record 3 or 4 videos a week so I can start to work like in advance. And also if I get sick or something happens and I can't record, I need there to be like a database of videos that I can still post. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Again, this is just me getting into YouTube thing. I love hearing about how many, what people's outputs are and how far ahead they are, or if they are at all. And just like everybody's different understandings of how they go about their workflow and sort of curate the content, release the content as well. So I imagine like if you're saying you record 3 to 4 times a week and you're recording and drawing then in your spare time, it must just be all the time. How do you take care of your creativity and your mind and imagination?
That's a good question. That's because I take regular breaks. It's like maybe 6 weeks of super hard work, and then I take a break for a week and then just do nothing. And I just work 7 days a week, but in those 7 days I can really mess around with my schedule. If the sun is shining and I feel like going out for a walk, I can go out for a walk. So I don't have like these fixed days on which I make my recordings. I do them when I feel like it, when my schedule allows it. So yeah, that's how I can cope with it. But it's a lot. It's a lot.
Just I want to ask James you the same question. How would you look after your creativity and your? Wait, laughing at my question.
I mean, I'm always the odd one out in this type of scenario, and so I don't know really. I think because I don't know. I'm very much fly by the seat of my pants. I think that I thrive off that final adrenaline, that fear of failure. I think that I need that energy in order to keep me motivated. With all the best intentions in the world, I don't manage to produce videos in advance. I have tried and they just fail. if I'm going to fail at a tutorial, it's when I'm trying to be organized and do it in advance. It seems to work for me, the energy of last minute. But how does that affect my health and well-being? I suppose because I've managed to waste so much time in advance to it. I mean, not because I've got kids and I've got other commitments as well. So, but I think I get my rest in a little bit ahead of that, and I suppose my rest time is the kind of the Monday, straight after a tutorial, and then I'm starting to find inspiration for images, and I do work through the week towards it, and I do the extended one, and then it's sort of like parent duty for the most part. But yeah, I would like to start producing more rather than less. So I don't think that my workload is excessive now, and it was kind of by design, really. I don't want to burn out. I want to be able to sustain doing this for a decade, or into retirement at least. Well, I say at least, not, it's a long way off, but it would be nice to be able to continue this for as long as YouTube is a thing. And I know what I'm like. If I overload myself, then I tend to lose all the enthusiasm for it. And this manages to work because I'm still enthusiastic about it when I do the uploads that I do. My intention really was to continue to be able to do my own personal work too. I mean, you said, Flo, that there's not a lot of time now for you to do your personal work, and it does seem like a sacrifice of being a YouTuber, isn't it? It is quite consuming.
Yeah.
I don't produce as many videos as either of you, but I do find it still consumes me. And just the energy of it, I think that your mindset tends to be busy, doesn't it, with YouTube concerns? But the intention for me is always to preserve a part of the week where I have the opportunity to do my own personal work, so that I don't resent not being able to do it. I've always considered myself an artist first and a teacher second, and it's always been that the teaching part has paid the bills and the artist part hasn't. But I'd like to just keep a little window of opportunity open for the artist productivity in me. That's just stuff I do for my own pleasure, to eventually kind of figure out a way of making money off of that. But it hasn't happened yet.
So I think your personal work then fuels your creativity.
Yes.
That's the real kind of, that's what keeps you feeling creative and energetic.
Keeps me sane.
Imaginative. Yeah. Exactly. Because even though you were saying about sort of the outputs might be different, even if it was just the one video a week and nothing in between, and there was no personal sort of art in the middle, I think that's still a conversation of how do you stay creative? How do you not come back to it 6 days later and then say, right, yeah, I've got to get my bearings again, kind of thing. There's all these the differences in your time and allocation to it can obviously affect your creativity and your output, but also can also keep you going along, keep you rolling, and with your ideas, and just comfort in the app and all the different techniques that you're picking up throughout the different designs that you make, and rolling them into the next episode, the next tutorial, and so on. So again, differences in practices and differences in how we fuel ourselves. Mine is always taking the dogs for a walk, and just at the minute where we move to, it's you in literally less than 2 minutes, you are just in nothing but green rolling hills surrounded by cottages or something like that. And I get mine from like nature and going to the beach and the waves. There's something about water to me that can give me energy. And like I said, walking the dogs is great. Taking it all in, and just the differences in just so when people say like, oh, where do you get your ideas, or just certain things, like how do you if you ask certain people, they'll say, oh, I just look in the world and I see certain things. But to other people, they don't really understand that process. One of them at the minute is where I'm walking the dogs. There is a tree that is just turning from bright green into just bright yellow and orange at the minute, and I'm just watching it and looking at the color changes and the density of those branches now. And because I tend to draw trees quite a lot, I'm now looking at it, just digesting it, and they're the things I pick up on, like throughout like those walks and stuff like that, where you're trying to fuel yourself. So do you know what, I think we could collectively keep talking about everything to do with art, creativity, but I think we could save this for another episode. I think we could carry this on, because we've got our tutorials to look back on from Halloween. And I think there's so many things that we could dive into. So we'll save all those awesome topics. Now, we proposed the idea of looking at our favorite 3 Halloween tutorials. Of course, we're in October, looking back at some of our Halloween designs from previous years. Now, of course, we're recording this on the 8th of October, so we're probably already curating, I know I am, Halloween content that's going to be coming out in the next few weeks anyway. And we were saying before we came on air as such, that we tend to have a little bit more of a recency bias towards some of our newer stuff. And we were talking, weren't we? And James, you were saying, when you were saying about the techniques that you pick up on, and then how that leans into your biasness towards your most recent tutorials.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's not just about the final image; it's about the process, isn't it? A lot of the time, and I find that the process is radically different now than it used to be. Even the image might roughly be kind of approximate at what it used to be, but the way of getting there is very much different. I use a lot more of the Procreate tools than I ever used to. I came at it, with a drawing and painter's perspective, and tried to do everything very much more manually, so to speak. And then now it's inevitably you learn about the tools of Procreate, and you can't ignore them if you've got any sense, can you? Because they're there. So
cool. Let's take a look then at some of our recent tutorials. As always, we've got our doc with all of our previous designs, and we've got prepared for today's show. So the first one, James, is yours. Talk us through this pumpkin design from, was it last year?
Yes, it was last year. Yeah. I just wanted to do a classic pumpkin, and I think we've all got pumpkins coming up. It's kind of like you have to do pumpkins, don't you, at Halloween at some point? It would be remiss to skip on the pumpkin kind of art and design. I kind of wanted to do something. I've always been a massive horror movie fan, and so I like the and so I wanted to do something that's a little, I wouldn't say scary, but a little bit gritty and has an element. I mean, my favorite kind of movies were like John Carpenter movies, and then they have this real kind of. I think just the budget probably denied them the ability to have too much on the set design, so they relied upon a lot of fog and mist and atmospherics to kind of hide the lack of budget. But I like that aesthetic, so I wanted to do a pumpkin that had a lot of glow to it, and then obviously all the kind of fog and I suppose it could be smoke, but I see it as more of like low-lying mist. I enjoyed the mist on this one, the kind of swirls of the fog, more than anything else. It's one that I would have to watch back if I was to do another pumpkin, because I was thinking about this earlier. I was thinking, shall I do another pumpkin video this year? And I may well do. But I was thinking, I can't remember how I did it last year. I know I did it with a line structure, and use that as a layer where I guess I filled in certain things, use it as maybe I used clipping mask. I don't even remember anymore. But yes, I think if I did it again, I would approach it probably a bit differently. And I think there's too much purple in it for my tastes. But yeah, it seemed to work as a contrasting kind of light sources and atmosphere. I was quite happy with that on the whole, yeah.
I remember seeing this one absolutely everywhere. Like I'm always in the Facebook groups, and there's always like one thing will get picked up from one period of time, whether it's October, Christmas, and then everybody shares their finished result, and it just snowballs. And before you know it, everybody's doing the same tutorial.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it looks amazing.
Well, like James,
thank you.
As we were saying, we're moving into a batch of pumpkin designs. Flo, you've got a 2-in-1 here.
That's a great concept.
It's because I saw so many of these like TikTok videos and shorts where people do these art reveal things where they have a sketch and then they reveal it. I'm not sure if it's still a thing now, but back when I created this tutorial, it was. So I thought, maybe people want to know how to do that. And I thought I could integrate it into this design, making one cute pumpkin and one that's a little bit scary. And I saw many people do the art reveal on TikTok and Reels with their design. So I think people had fun with this one. So I think it's good to throw this one back for people who have missed this one, because it's a lot of fun to make these two designs and do that reveal trick.
Yeah, I was going to say this has multiple layers of like reward for the time input into it. You've got 2 designs to start with, as well as then something cool to share on
Yeah.
social media as well. So
Yeah, you
it
can
it
make a
just
fun video. Yeah.
lots of reward for the time input in it. I always I think also I don't really tend to see the ones that are quite cutesy almost in terms of like the hearts for the eyes. I think when I always go for pumpkins, I'm always like really sharp angular shapes. So you
Yeah,
have
but I'm
that
a
really
girl.
big contrast. Yeah. I might make a cute pumpkin design this year. Who knows? But it's cool to see the different, the stark contrast then between the 2 sides as well. And to an extent, we kind of have a similar kind of concept in a way where there's like 2 things happening at the same time. Flo, first of all, actually, before we move on to mine, and James, yours was on YouTube, wasn't it? The
Yeah.
pumpkin design, and Flo, yours is on YouTube
Mine
as
as
well.
well. Yeah.
Awesome. Guys, if you are watching along and you are interested in any of these tutorial designs, the links to all of the tutorials will be in the description down below. So if you find one that you really like throughout the show, you'll be able to find it in the description down below. This one for me is on Patreon. And this was that if you, a skull of a pumpkin based within an actual pumpkin itself. So this one was a big tutorial at the time. For me, I think it was around about the 2-hour mark.
Gosh.
And just
Wow.
tons and tons of like line scrapes because
Yeah.
I could have used a soft airbrush and kept it really kind of smooth with the textures and the blending of the colors. But for me, it was literally left side is the brightest. And as you can see, zooming in almost, that there's just bold color that separates them. There's no sort of light opacity in there or anything like that. It's just bright yellow to the left, almost whitish, through to yellow, through to a yellowy orange, and then through to like a brown tone. And then because we had multiple elements to it, like the outer skin, then the inside of the pumpkin skin, as well as then the skull itself as well. It was a big tutorial, and I remember this being one of the longer ones at the time. And
How did you figure out
the drain of it.
How did you figure out what the skull of a pumpkin, what it looks like? Did you kill one?
That's such a good question. That's such a funny question because I had so many people be like, why would they have so many teeth? Why is there so many teeth in there? Just contemplating the idea. And I was like, listen, this is just up for debate. You can take away some teeth. I must admit, it's a bit of a stretch. It's a bit of a stretch because obviously
I really like it. I like the idea.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's so wide that the mouth anyway, that you could just create an endless row of teeth to get right up into the corner of the sort of cheekbone almost. So yeah, I kind of had to cut it a bit short and leave some space for a candle behind.
It's got a nice
I just remember
lino block kind of effect to it, kind of aesthetic as well, which I really quite like. It's nice.
But I was saying, I remember this being one of the longer ones and just being like, wow, that was draining. And just like the actual like toll on yourself, because when you're we were saying earlier, like drawing for yourself in your spare time, which ultimately this was, I drew this the year before as just doodling for myself, and then only recorded it a year later. And because I remembered I had the concept and I thought I'll go back and actually use that. I just remember being like drained from it. But just like when you're recording, it's far more intense than like when you're on your sofa just doodling and you can go grab a drink and whatever and come back. The intensity of that duration can be quite tiring. So that was.
Do you ever take a break during the recording, or do you just
sometimes?
Is it just one take?
Sometimes it is one take. I must admit, sometimes it's forced upon me because my camera will just overheat and say I need 10 minutes, and then at that point I will take a break and have to. James, do you ever take a break as well?
I've got time.
Back to Flo as well.
I do it on a Sunday morning. There's no time for breaks. Blimey. No, I mean, no, no, I don't have breaks.
Flo, do you ever take breaks in between recordings, or is it just one
all
shot?
The time? Yeah, I have like this SD card, and it can only record like 45 minutes, and then I need to take it out and put it on my MacBook. So every 45 minutes, if it's a longer video, then I take a break and I grab a drink and cool off, and then I continue. And sometimes I even have a break that's hours long because something comes up So yeah, definitely breaks.
So does the SD card sometimes feel like a hindrance? Are you like to stop your flow, or are you now used to it to the point where you can anticipate it and then,
Yeah,
kind of
I'm
reel
used to
yourself
it.
back a little bit?
I look at the time like, okay, 10 minutes left for this like sections. I can do
So it's like
this.
you're at an actual office job and just looking at the clock
Yeah.
going, it's nearly lunchtime.
Yeah.
I love that. James, your next one. Talk me through this one. This, I believe, was on YouTube as well.
Yes.
Tend to be on YouTube, don't they? Then extended on
This
Patreon.
is actually the extended version of the YouTube one. So this tutorial is on YouTube, but there's then some additional detailing on the path. I think that's the only real difference, is the path itself. So yeah, this is an instance where I've been exploring structural images in my tutorials over the last few tutorials. But prior to that, I was pretty much exclusively just nature landscapes, really. There'd be occasional object type ones like a snow globe or something like that in there, but for the most part, it was just not featureless, but just natural forms, nothing structural. So this was one where I just thought, no, I need to really tackle something a bit more complex, try structure. And so, it is literally just the silhouette, and it doesn't have any detail on it other than the flatness, which it should do, really. The lighting kind of would dictate that actually it probably needs just a few lines being picked up, even in the shadow side. So I can look at it now with a bit of time on it and think, yeah, it needs a little bit more. That would have been a good thing to have done in the extended one. But instead I focused on the path and got that kind of crazy paving texture, which was it was an interesting one. It was like a mesh. What did I do? I did like a load of just lines just going across, and I did it as a line thing. But it seemed to work. It was an interesting technique. Rather than drawing each individual block, it was more of like a netting that's all snagged and gnarled up. That I did it as a separate layer, and it managed to create that effect. So I was quite pleased with that. But yeah, I enjoyed doing that one. It was
No, I was going to say, we've said in previous tutorials, you tend to always be able to blend cool tones, warm tones into some degree where the lighting is, or in the darker areas, the blue tones, of course. And this one again, just you've got a good blend of all of those colors that you typically see in a lot of your other tutorials
I find
as well.
I've always been
when I think of the
super fascinated by contrasts. I think in my personal work as well, you get light and dark and color contrasts. So it would be warm and cold colors, but then also sort of structures and chaotic elements too. I think I like to explore the contrasting elements, and that I guess that is something that does tend to crop up in most of my images. Yeah.
One thing I really like about this one, and it's not something I've ever explored necessarily, is the fact that you've just kind of, it reminds me of the Shadowlands from Lion King, where all the trees, there's nothing on them. There's no small branches, there's no leaves, there's nothing. It's very barren. It's very, very dead almost. And I've not experimented with that, but it's really cool to see that kind of approach towards the trees that you don't really see too much, other than obviously this time of year where we get a chance to kind of go down those kind of avenues. Yeah, so it's very cool.
You wouldn't see it in the real world,
I
would
thought
you?
to myself,
it's very
I thought to myself recently, I was like, what about like a silhouette of like a castle in the background? I was like, I swear I've seen someone do this before. And I was like, I in my mind sometimes I always have to try my best to be like, I remember, and like I said earlier on, I've got a brain like a sieve, that for me to try and remember, like, wait, has somebody done this before? Has this been done on YouTube? How close would it be if I did do this? And like the differences in it. It's such.
I think it's
and then
inevitable.
I was like, yeah, no, it's James. James did this a couple of years ago. Yeah, I mean, this has happened. And Flo, you might be able to sort of touch on this because you've done it for so long. Has there ever been a scenario where you've recorded something and you're even halfway through editing, for example, and then somebody else has posted it, well, not posted it, but posted a similar concept.
Yeah, I've had
as
that
you're
happen.
already editing, you're like, whoa.
Yeah. And it's crazy. Yeah, I don't know how something like that can happen, but I guess sometimes, artistic minds think alike.
Yeah.
And yeah, it sucks because yeah, I'm ready to post it, and then I just need to do it. But it hasn't happened a lot. I remember one time when I'm not sure. I think James, I think you got some
Yeah.
hate because you created this landscape, but James used the same reference image as
Yeah.
I had used for a tutorial, so people started
Yeah.
hating, and I'm like, there's nothing
They're like,
going
you've
on.
just
It's just the
copied
same
Flo. You've
reference
copied
image.
Flo. Flo did
Yeah,
this. What, and it's like, and then obviously I had to go and check Flo's videos, and I think it was I don't think it was even that long before mine. I don't even know. Maybe it was a few months, but um,
yeah. I'm not sure.
no. But yeah,
Yeah, but people,
maybe I'd
there's no
seen it on
need to
some
hate.
level. I don't know, but yeah, it was just a case of we've found an interesting reference that we both thought was
Yeah,
inspirational, and that was that. Because if you look at the approaches, they've been very different, wouldn't they, in the way that we executed them? Um, but yeah, it's
I
inevitable.
think
There's
it
going
was
to be
interesting
crossover.
for people to see. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and there's
yeah.
no need for people to hate because,
No,
like, we're all cool with each other. If something like that happens and if you get the same inspiration, that's fine. No need to
I mean,
write
my
hate
version didn't
comments.
do as well as yours, Flo. So I guess had it done like 10 times better, you might
Uh,
have been like, "Well, damn him, he's copied me." But
no, I wouldn't.
It's
I'm not
happened.
like that.
no, no.
It's happened to me before, but I've reached out to the creator on Instagram and gone, just a heads up, I've got a such and such design coming out, next week or the week after,
Yeah.
just so at least there's some heads and they're prepared. And I'll even send them the design and be like, this is what it looks like. There are differences, but we have spoke about, or, we're very close in these types of elements, which I think that's maybe not what the comments see, is where we maybe even reach out to each other and say,
Yeah.
just a heads up, like mine might be kind of close in a couple of weeks' time. Don't know how we got on the same brainwave, but it is kind of what it is. And we're all cool. Like you say, we're all cool with each other anyway.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter.
I feel like followers are way more bothered by it than we are, I think.
Yeah. They get really angry on your behalf, don't they?
Yeah.
She's funny.
Yeah, there's no need. No need.
Next one is one of yours, Flo. Is this on YouTube or is this on
This
Patreon?
one is at Patreon, yeah, totally different from the previous ones. Yeah, maybe a bit girly, cute.
Very cute.
I always like to every once in a while to create something cute. I always enjoy creating these designs. They just make me happy, and I feel like they make patrons and followers happy as well because they're pretty easy to execute. In this case, we just made a simple sketch with these pretty simple shapes. So anyone can do this, and they have this really cute like sticker design for Halloween. So yeah. And I love the Halloween colors with orange and purple, these complementary colors. I think that always works well. So I also encouraged followers to just use this color palette and create other types of monsters and Halloween elements as well because they just work so well together.
They say they're easy to execute, but I think that's because you've taught it well. But I know that if I was to sit down and try and create characters like this, it wouldn't work. I think there's
you
very
can follow
specific.
some tutorials.
I should do, shouldn't I? That's what I should do. But they're difficult. I think actually there's a certain aesthetic touch to them that isn't necessarily everyone is capable of doing that. I think for me it would take on a different tone. I'm not as versed in that the visual language. I think it is a very specific thing, and I think that I look at it and think, oh, I wish I could do more stuff like that. So I really like them.
It would be really nice to see you try your hand at something like this sometime.
Maybe one day. Yeah, maybe one day.
I guess it's also it's because I get surrounded by lots of cute stuff. I have 2 daughters, so yeah, over the years I've seen so many cute toys and cute animation series and stuff like that. So yeah, I just got a lot of inspiration in my head, I guess, because of them.
I remember you doing the it was on TikTok quite a lot. I think it was at the time. It was the octopus that turns inside out. It's angry, and then the blue and the pink. I think it was.
It's a bit the same like the pumpkin. Yeah, that was a great hit. Yeah. It was actually my daughter who came up with that idea.
That's so cool.
She had a pumpkin. She had this plushie, and she said, "You need to make an octopus like this one."
Cool.
That's awesome. I wish I had that kind of backup. I've just got the dogs, and they don't really help me with any ideas. So Sadly, it's just a one-man band. I agree with James, though. I think there's certain elements to the kind of cute designs that you pick up on when you do it quite often, like certain ways of doing the eyes, tiny little details here and there to allude to like fur, for example. I saw somebody in on my Discord post something very cutesy as well, and they had lots of these tiny little just dashes on the edge, the back of the bear. But those dashes were enough for me to understand that, the fur is, it's not just smooth. They didn't want it to look like a smooth surface as such. And the tiny little elements you can add into the designs just to give them the cutesy thing. And I think you have to do them. I think for me, I would have to do a few of them just to understand, again, like the elements that you would add in there. And also there is a real skill, I believe, in breaking it down and simplifying it to the simple shapes and adding in just a subtle amount of shadow here and there just to give it a little bit of a not quite so flat design to it. For example, I'm looking at the pumpkin and I can see in the sort of bottom left side of it, you've added like a very, very light layer of kind of a darker orange, or whether it's the layer duplicated again and lowered down. So it's just those subtle things that you can do just to add some shading to it and lighting that just make it pop even more. But a question I've got here is, do you feel like you mentioned earlier, you saying like you like doing the cutesy stuff because you're a girl, and do you ever feel like that's ever anything in your kind of YouTube strategy that you ever think to say is like the majority of your audience going to kind of resonate with that more so potentially than say ours, for example?
Well, I don't really have, it's not really a strategy. I just try to create what I enjoy.
Yeah.
But I do notice it's like maybe 60% is female. And of course, there's also a bit of a younger audience. And I think that's probably mainly girls. If I look
That's
around,
a very different
also
audience than us, I think, then in that case. I've not got my
it's
analytics
varied.
in front of me, but
I also have like 50 or 60 plus. It's really, really varied. But yeah, young kids also follow my tutorials, and I think maybe for your tutorials might be a bit out of their league. I'm sorry, young people, but it's a bit more complicated. So I can imagine they start with my tutorials, and once they get more confident, they might start doing landscapes. But it's very it's very doable for even as young as like 7 or 8 year olds follow tutorials that I post. So it's really cool. I always enjoy when parents they send me the work of their kids and they're so proud. So cute.
Very nice. Yeah.
That's awesome. Do you ever print these out and like make them into stickers as such? Because these look like they would make a perfect pack.
Yeah, they would. No, I've never done that. I've looked into like these sticker machine things, but I wasn't able to decide what type of printer or sticker maker I would need. So I haven't gotten into that yet, but I think it would be fun.
It would be, yeah.
That would be really very, very cool. Let us know in the comments if you want Flo to start a whole sticker factory, and then we'll have these printed out for you. Next up is one of mine. This is a Patreon tutorial from last year. A skull island design with the moonlight shining down on it. It's meant to be in the middle of water, and coming back to it, I think I should have added a little bit less horizontal lines in that water at the bottom. I should have added a few more curves and bounces in there just to make it a little bit uneven. But this was one of my favorites from last year because it was kind of, I think, one of the first ones where I managed to integrate like the concept of like a skull in there and be a bit braver. And I remember posting like the sneak peek of it on Patreon and being like, this could go down very badly. It could be too much for people. It could, if people are so used to kind of like in this time of year, autumnal kind of landscapes and stuff like that, that this one might be a step too far in terms of spookiness. But I think people actually thought it was really cool, which I really appreciated. And it just allowed for other opportunities to then come further down the line as well in other tutorials. And this one I was really happy with. I remember the cloud work at the back, which was like the Dove Lake brush, and then a highlight layer on top of it and just smudging it right up onto the edge of the clouds just so that the moonlight could just sort of illuminate just one side of it. And actually zooming in, I can see like the cracks in the skull as well. And there was like the crack with a dark line and then a highlighted white line just beside it to give it that indentation. And it looked really nice and sharp. And this was also one where I don't sometimes enjoy sort of stonework. I think sometimes you can really sit down and really go to town with stonework, and you want to work out so many elements. Is it sharp rock? Has it got lots of sort of debris on it? Is it smooth? And then that also makes a huge difference to how you would potentially apply the texture. But blurring it in the foreground, I was really happy with as well. So, an interesting concept.
I'm curious how
the blurring really adds that depth. It's really nice.
It does.
Thank you.
I'm curious how would you structure the tutorial of this, because obviously it's not a simple shape to do the anatomy of the skull. Was there a template that you would provide in an instance like that?
This is another topic I think we could all talk on as well. Is so for this one, it would have probably, I imagine, just the central piece of the skull. I would have provided what I refer to as a stencil guide. Yeah. It would have been essentially like a pencil trace of my design, because a lot of the time I want to make sure people can participate at all levels, whether or not they are brand new to it but want to do potentially what looks like a bit more of a challenge in design. I want to be able to allow them to participate, and sometimes I will do that line guide. Now, I do encourage people, if you think you can see it on my screen, you can see, so nowadays I'll do a 4x4 grid, a drawing guide. And then if the stencil's on there as well, I will urge them to pause it. If you want to pause it, please, do so. Take a look at where my guide is and the stencil. Don't use it if you don't want to, and then draw the shape in yourself. But I think sometimes because it's such a main staple of the design, if it didn't look right, if it didn't have the right depth to it, and the certain things sort of leaning closer towards you, then it could look very flat. And I think if you don't nail the sort of main focal point of it, I could imagine someone following it and being like, I'm not even going to move on to the land at the front and the sky, because exactly. Flo, do you ever provide like a guide of sort, or do you go about it in a different way?
Yeah, sometimes I always try to make it as easy as possible. So hopefully people don't need a stencil, but sometimes when it's really complicated, I'll provide my sketch, for example, with a grid, or when it's something with perspective, I'll add that. But also I encourage people to just use that as a reference and not use the sketch as is, but just so that I can have it next to their work, and just at their leisure, just sketch that out and not feel pressured by following the video.
Definitely. So, and I think that's something we always try to, I think, in some way, or in our processes, work out how we can get anybody from start to finish, however, whatever means, whether it's a guide or a particular couple of early steps, just to lay out the foundations and then detail it from there. And again, we spoke about processes quite a lot. And now we're actually going to jump back to one of Flo's designs now. Flo, this is your cauldron design. Is this on YouTube or is this on Patreon?
It's on YouTube. And I don't think I made it for Halloween specifically. I just thought it would be fun to draw a cauldron with like this heart shape, like damp coming out of it. It's animation tutorial actually for
cool.
I guide people through the process of drawing the cauldron and the little skull, and then we animate that damp stuff coming out and forming that heart. So it's like 2-in-1 tutorial, which is a lot of fun, because just like with the pumpkin, you can turn this into a fun video which you can share on your social media. So I guess also probably appealing for a younger audience wanting to share their work in a fun way. So I really had fun with this design. Also very simple shapes, easy to follow. And I needed it to be easy because it's also an animation tutorial. I don't want anything too complicated. It shouldn't be a drag to first create the illustration and then get into the animation process. So I kept it simple. And again, fun, girly, pink and purple colors. I matched my light. I matched my light today with this design.
Do you have a cauldron in the
Is
background?
the animation?
Is that what the light?
Maybe making a love potion.
Is the animation in Procreate, or is it in Dreams?
Procreate. Yeah.
Have you messed with Dreams very much?
No, I'm not. I'm not that big of a fan. I was hoping I would be, but I don't like it that much.
Really?
And I don't like making videos with it, like making tutorials, because there's so much going on the screen, and I'm just fidgeting with zooming in and out. I don't know, and I just don't enjoy making complicated animations that much.
No.
So I'll just focus on Procreate. But I hear
also,
you
there's so many more elements,
James.
Isn't there, with Dreams?
Yeah, I just think leave that to some. I think leave the animation to another YouTuber. I think I feel quite happy that I've got the thing that I do. I don't want to overcomplicate it. And also, when you have an audience that wants to do still images for the most part, you can tweak it here and there. But if you start changing the format of your channel, that is only going to appeal to a small niche within your audience, then unfortunately, we're a little bit guided by the algorithm, and you don't want to do stuff that really scuppers your channel and ruins things, or it just isn't appealing to 90% of your audience. You don't want to go down that road too much, Also,
it takes so long. There's so many factors you have to implement in there, emotion, and not only, I think also the fact that, like you were saying, Flo, is you want to draw it first. Like, you have to draw maybe all of the different elements in a certain way as well, whether it's a character and you want to leave the shoulder and then the elbow and so on. If you're going to do actual like animations of like people, for example, I did an animation. It was a hammer and nail, and to the point where I knew that, do people want to draw these very simple elements, or do I just give them the assets so that they can, it's two parts. It's like, we're going to draw it, we're going to animate it. And if you want to just jump straight to animation, you can do. I mean, I should probably go back and look at that video. It's like retention, and see if people just jumped straight to that point anyway, because I think that would probably sort of understand, do people want to draw it and animate it, or do they just want to understand and learn the process of just simply how did you turn the characters into their animation between each other. It's such a long process. One tutorial I did, which was just which is the next one, which is the in a similar way that you mentioned about having something that they could kind of share online. And this one kind of happened by accident. This tutorial is a sort of layered paper cutout design from Halloween. This was very much a kind of follow-on from an Easter one that I did in the same year. So I thought, well, this is another period of time that you could do some sort of element to use the paper cutout design sort of style. And with this one, I remember grabbing all of the shadow layers at the same time and rotating them round in a circle. I'll try and record it and put it into the edit as well. But it showed how the lighting, you could kind of manipulate it as if you had a lamp and you were rotating it around the design. And I only did it in the tutorial just to show them, like, you can direct this lighting wherever you want. You can pick a different angle if you think it looks cooler. And people recorded their screens of them doing it. And then they started posting that as well. And I was like, that, I'd never even thought about it, but it was just a complete accident and a fluke. But I always enjoy these paper cutout ones. They're always quite fun to do. And the process is so locked in. Yeah, you can definitely create so much. And to a degree, you could argue it's, are you looking down on paper? Should it be that deep? Or is it that you've layered them with like pieces of wood in between in like a light box style design? And so that you've got the gaps in between to do the lighting. But and
that's
this one
what I
like
would do if I would make a paper cutout. So yeah, definitely there's something in between.
Definitely.
Yeah. Foam.
And you can do it differently, can't you? You can do it where you can do it where it's being lit from the far side, so the deepest point and being lit towards you.
Glow.
I remember Tatty Works did one very much like that, where it was a light box design. It was awesome to see it the opposite way round, almost, where the lighting is coming from the very bottom rather than looking down on it. So there's lots of different ways you can do it, and neither are wrong, and you can come up with different. To be honest, I'm now thinking and looking at this going, what would that look like if you did it the other way around? So maybe that's one for a future sort of idea. James, we're going to move on to your third and final Halloween design, but it's actually your most recent tutorial as well, isn't it? That you've released on YouTube.
It is, yeah. Again, I wanted to do another structural one. I did the the spooky kind of castle one last year, but being a huge horror fan, I wanted to do something genuinely a little bit scary. So I went for the kind of sinister kind of horror, haunted house. You can imagine kind of murders happening there or something really horrible. So yeah, somehow you can't help but, as when you're trying to create an image, gravitate towards something that looks harmonious and kind of attractive at the same time with the colors, and so I managed to find images and references, and then come up with a composition that I thought was quite beautiful aesthetically, but it has that horror element to it. I was quite pleased. The one mistake I've had it pointed out to me, I noticed as well, is because I didn't plan ahead. When I reversed and mirrored the house, I've not done the chimney in the reflection, the main chimney, which is a bit annoying. Yeah, it's a bit annoying, but there you go.
Once you see it, you shouldn't have said this.
I know. But then somebody else pointed out that the reflection looks like a witch's hat, with like a twisty witch's hat in the reflection, which you wouldn't look like that if it had the chimney to obscure it. So I'll take that. That's the reason I did it. Yeah, that's the reason.
Does that ever happen with you, Flo? Like, because we've said about this many weeks, that somebody points something out and goes, "Is that meant to be like that?"
Yeah, I've had that happen, but I can't remember the exact video. Or sometimes I see it myself and I'm like, oh no, I forgot a certain element in it. Usually it's reflections that you tend to forget some parts, or yeah, it happens. But that just proves I'm human too. I make mistakes.
Exactly.
It's okay to make mistakes.
Exactly.
We all do.
I'm just zooming in on the window, and I thought for a second at the full scale, zoomed all the way out, I thought there was like a silhouette of like somebody in the window.
Could be, couldn't it?
Because the second window down from
It's
the
a
top
haunted
has this
image.
kind of darker. It's almost like, are you alluding towards something?
No.
Is this the extended version?
No, it's not the extended one. I'm struggling to know what to. I'll add a chimney to the reflection. That's what I'll do. But I need to do something else as well. But it's a good idea. Adding a little figure in the window there, just to add a real, or maybe in the top window, not illuminated, but just a little sort of ghostly figure in there or something, just to really ramp up the horror of it. I think maybe a little boat.
I love the color though. There's quite to go with quite a green palette like that. It's quite bold as well to do that, and I think it looks great. And the trees look good in the background as well. They still hold a lot of their structure even with the green background as well. It does a good job of maintaining.
Thank you.
Its shape and form as it makes its way back. I'm looking at it now, trying to break down what I think I could add in the extended version, because in a long-winded way, this comes back to our initial topic that we spoke about. Because you do your extended versions, you now have to then look at this and think about what else could I add. And to a degree, if you are done, that could be quite a struggle if you think that you're happy with it as it is.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I could add a boat, but then adding a complex boat into that then becomes a bit of a nightmare to match the colours and the lighting. And if I do add a boat, for example, it would just end up being probably just a silhouetted one. I could add bats to the, this is the kind of conversation I have. I think, well, are the additions going to be so superficial as just to be little minor tweaks? Or can I just find some element that if I zoom in, it just needs actually a little bit more polish to it? And there's definitely there's areas where the structure meets the water, and it could perhaps do with some little extra kind of ripples and things like that. So it tends to be the fine tuning of details just to ramp up the refinement and the realism of it. But if I can think of something structural to add to this, then I will do that. But I always start with thinking, well, what do I not like about it? First of all, what do I need to actually fix? And then if I can think of something creative that actually adds, a noticeable value to it as well, then I will always try and do that as well. So we'll see. I'm going to have to tackle this one tomorrow, I think. For the Patreon.
So you don't think about what you want to add in the Patreon version beforehand, or
Sometimes.
Well, there's no beforehand in your case, but while you work, you don't think like, okay, I should quit now because otherwise I won't have anything to add.
I don't want to get to
Or
that
is it?
position where I'm withholding something. I've tried it in the past, and then it seems to compromise the image that I'm putting out on YouTube. So I try to do as much as I can within YouTube, but I inevitably find something that I would revisit and do slightly better, or differently. And sometimes I do get inspirations, and sometimes I know ahead of time. I can look at the concept that I come up with and think, okay, well, I can break it down, and I know I'll have enough time to do that element, but it's going to require a little bit more time to do that one. Um, but in this instance, I created as much as I could in the time frame, and now it's just going to be going back and seeing if I can revitalize it with another element, and we'll see how that goes. I'm not yet sure.
But
It's a bit
are
of a
you never
gamble
like,
sometimes, with the
crap?
extended one.
This is
Sometimes the minor
this is
things,
perfect
and it doesn't
already.
radically look different, and other times it could be quite substantial. But no, I prefer to just reflect upon it and see how I feel about it after maybe 1 or 2 days. That tends to be the approach.
So how long do you spend? Just one more question. One.
Mhm.
How
Yeah,
long do
no,
you
go for it. You
usually
go for it.
spend? How long do you usually spend at Patreon with the polishing or adding a different element?
Um,
How long does
what
that
I'm
take?
conscious of, yeah, I'm conscious of the fact that if they've already, if the tutorial on YouTube is almost an hour long, and I know from anecdotal people have told me that something that I've uploaded that's an hour long might take them 4 hours to get through, so it could be
Hmm.
quite a slog sometimes. So I tend to upload something that's roughly about 15 minutes, that in terms of it taking me longer to produce it, but the additions or the video that I upload is roughly around 15 minutes. So it
Hmm.
adds another element to it, but it is not going to make it a whole additional tutorial on top of that. It's meant to be just that, an extension, rather than um, a too overwhelming an addition to it. It's there to
Yeah.
improve and refine it, really. So it maybe they throw another hour at it, and then they'll have improved their own version as well.
Okay.
Awesome. Let's move on to Flo's. So we ours are already out. This will be out by the time that we are publishing this episode. And this is a
Yeah.
beautiful design. 2 parts to it. Talk us through both parts of this.
Yeah. This is also me just polishing a Patreon. I wanted to make
Oh, cool.
another eye drawing. I think it used to be my favorite subject when I was younger. I always drew
Yeah.
eyes in my notebooks at school. It was just a fun thing to do. So yeah, I think a lot of people agree that it's fun to draw eyes. So I thought,
Yeah.
let's make an easy to follow eye drawing tutorial at YouTube. I didn't want to make it too complicated, so we're just going for like a pencil drawing, and then at Patreon, take that pencil drawing and turn it into a fully rendered, a full color eye painting.
Gorgeous. It's
So
really
yeah,
beautiful.
you can just stick with the black and white version, or go for something, yeah, more polished. So yeah,
I
that
love the
that's my
concept. I
reason.
Yeah.
love the two. Flo, have you ever experimented before then with the 2-part design as well for a tutorial set?
Yeah, just once. It wasn't quite like this one, but I did a watercolor design once in which we painted a little shop, and then at Patreon we extended it into a small little street. But I haven't done anything like exactly like this one before. So if people like this one, then I might end up doing something similar in a future video. Who knows? I don't know how this one
What
is performing yet. So this is me from the past. So we'll see.
One thing I really love that you've done in the Patreon, and well, somewhat in both actually, you've kept it just to the eye and the brow, which you've then sort of left the skin super smooth around it, which first of all just acts like a really minimalistic kind of
That's
backdrop
great.
to it, and it just creates so much focus on the center of the eye. And also, I think if you integrated in the bridge of the nose, for example, as well, it might change certain elements, and then also how potentially the lighting would affect sort of the corner of the eye as well. So it's quite, it's almost kind of like a brave move to do it, but it just makes so much sense to do it and just keep it just to that.
Yeah,
Did you experiment
I just felt
with
like
different
this.
approaches?
No, this is just the way I always did it. Also, when I was younger, I feel like this is just easier if you add like a nose bridge or shading for like the cheekbone, it's easier to mess it up or to not like what it looks like. So I think this is just an easier way. I want to keep it simple. So yeah, it was an obvious choice for me to do it like this.
And the colors in the eye, did you always know you were going to go for this kind of rainbow aesthetic to the inside? Was it just going to be blue originally, or did you always know?
I like colors and I like rainbows, so I thought why not add them into an iris. So yeah, I thought it would work, and I think it does. It's not an
It's really
entire
dramatic.
rainbow, but yeah, I think it adds a nice extra touch.
It does.
It's a nice extra drama indeed. Yeah. Yeah, that's
And
just my girly touch again, I think.
have you? So I don't want to give too much away because, of course, this is one of the tutorials on Patreon. But in terms of the eye, did you have a whole palette for every sort of corner of the eye there to add all the colors, or was there sort of a layering effect in there?
Yeah, no, it's also a layering effect. I had a color palette prepared, but with stuff like this, I usually also pick colors along the way, and some colors they like appear when I use different blending modes or different
Yeah.
brushes, and then yeah, you get this effect with it's just a few colors, but with the different brushes and blending modes, you get a whole variety of colors.
I think it's beautiful.
It is gorgeous.
Really, just so many elements.
Oh,
The
thank
lighting
you.
on the eye, the light source that's up in the sort of top right corner of the eye. I always love the details that are very subtle. Almost, it's like how the lashes drop shadow onto the eye as well. And sometimes you can really emphasize them, or you can keep them really subtle. And then these ones, they're almost leaning a little bit more towards the subtle side, but it just adds so much detail to the eye as an overall as well. I think people are going to absolutely love this. This is just beautiful. And again, I was saying earlier that the first part is its own style as well. And I don't think many of us tend to try to just do sketches so much on Patreon, on YouTube so much, because I think sometimes we're especially in the digital space, it's almost like that's always considered like your sketch. That's it. Like that's the foundation for your design going forward into the rest of the video, rather than simply just drawing with the pencil brushes or charcoals potentially as well, and having that almost traditional vibe to it as well, because we spoke about traditional versus digital last week, and something like this just nicely blends those two worlds together for people to have that traditional vibe and aesthetic, but also, like you've done with your part 2, take it into just that real digital realm and the beauty of all the tools.
I'm sorry, I totally lost you. I'm not sure what you said, but my connection was gone for a minute. But what I wanted to say is that for this one, for the black and white pencil piece, I really wanted to get a more polished look and a more finished look, because if I would just need a sketch for that rendered piece, then I wouldn't make a sketch this polished, and it will be way more simple. So I really tried to make something that has a more finished look for YouTube, so that you can also just see this as a finished piece.
It is a finished looking thing, yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. I'll be super interested to see how that works out, and like obviously how many people, it would be interesting to know how many people also want to just follow on and continue on that journey and do the second part. It's going to be an awesome tutorial. I'm sure everybody's going to love it.
Yeah, I'm hoping to see lots of eyes. I'm hoping to see lots of eyes on social media. Yeah.
What I released last week was a church sunset design. Again, just messing around with trees still and just different elements in terms of the snow gum. One thing I did in this one, which was in the background, was create a gradient of color and then just use the smudge tool to create lots of layers to it. And in some elements, it can look like clouds, just like layered up and staggered as it makes its way backwards. But otherwise, it can just have that kind of painting look to it. It's weird as well, because if you actually take the trees away, the sky had far more form to it, and far more sort of intricate elements. But when you put the snow gum in there on top of the trees, it covered up so much of it that probably didn't need to put quite so much time into the background. I could have left it a little simpler and in terms of time duration, but maybe it's still good practice for that sort of type of sky if people want to do that with the smudge tool and blending, taking color from, if you've got a gradient top to bottom, taking color from the color below, pushing it up and on to like the yellow into the oranges and the reds. And then once you push it up, push it horizontally so you can create all the staggered layers and making your way from top to bottom. This one actually did far better than I thought it was going to do as well. I think sometimes the simplicity of a design could really sort of actually aid it in terms of people wanting to tackle the project as well. So I think for something that has a focal point that's simply just a blocky silhouette, it did all right.
I saw indeed that it was well received, and I was wondering if it might be because there's a church in it. Just my thought. Maybe I don't see a lot of designs with churches in it, and maybe people like creating something. That's like a religious symbol. I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder with having you two here is because to a degree we have to think. I'm trying to word it in a way that I don't want it to come across the wrong way. What I'm trying to say is I think a lot of the time there's potentially elements that we try to stay safe. We want to stay safe with the concepts, and sometimes religion can emphasize emotion in people, whether it be positive or negative, which of course could hinder the design and the videos, how it was received. And I also thought the same thing. I thought, well, hang on, is because it's a religious kind of design that it's got a little bit more connection with a lot of people? And then it made me think, well, could I do other religious kind of designs? But then I'm also very, and that's not my opinion. That's opinions of other people that can't accept that other people can have their own views and opinions, which is just, a whole different topic. And this is something that you probably even like, it's like politics. You don't want to antagonize certain sides. So with this particular one, I don't necessarily know, is it something I'll do again? Do I want to dig a little bit deeper into this concept? Would either of you potentially integrate kind of religious elements? I'll start with Flo.
For me, no, I would probably stay away from that because I'm not a religious person. I respect all religions, but I don't feel like I should be painting or drawing anything like that. It just wouldn't feel right for me. If I would be, perhaps if I would be a Christian, I would make something like that. I don't know, but I try to stay away from topics like that as well as politics. The only thing I do paint and integrate are rainbows, but that's my limit.
James,
how about you, James?
Well, I mean, I considered doing a kind of graveyard with a church for Halloween, so I guess I was considering that, but this isn't that, is it? This is, I guess it has more of that kind of religious undertones to it because of the light and the colours and the possible meanings you could read into it. I don't know really. I think if I found the right inspiration, then it wouldn't be something I would steer away from, but it would have to be like it's an element of the landscape. If you took away the trees, then that would be another thing. It would seem very much in your face, the church. But because it's a landscape and it integrates with everything else, I think it just becomes, for me, another architectural feature that happens to be interesting in that scene. So I think it may be that it's getting traction because there's a religious element, but I think it just works as an image. I think it's an interesting contrast between the organic and the structural. I think it just looks dramatic. I think it could just be as simple as that. You never know.
And it wasn't intended to be. Yeah. It wasn't intended to be anything kind of leaning heavily towards religious side, because I mean the cross at the top is tiny. At the very tiny top.
I didn't even notice it. Oh yeah,
really tiny at the top of the church. And I said to people at the time doing it, I said, "This is optional. You do it if you want to do it. This is up to you." And I could already understand that I need to understand everybody involved at this point and how to accommodate for everyone. And I myself am not religious, but it stemmed from a simple fact of seeing the church in the village all the time. That's just simply what it was. And I thought, actually, that's quite a good sort of subject matter to create something and fairly simple if you think about kind of the structure of it in a silhouette form. So that's how it came about. But yeah, I mean, if people have done it, I would be fascinated to know in the comments on this video if you could let us know, or let me know, just, you know, how you did it have any sort of religious impact on you doing it? Did that have an impact on you actually wanting to do the design? I think it's an interesting topic. But yeah, something that I tend to typically try and stay away from. Like we said, I think Flo, you put it very well, you know, steering away from it. We like to do our art, and our space typically on here is, this is our fun space to play with and just create art, which is always meant to be in a positive, happy nature with a great community that we all have. Not controversial, you know, spend time with our community, just enjoy learning and curating something that, you know, again, we had fun doing. That's the most important thing. And one thing that has been extremely fun has been this episode. Flo, thank you so much for joining us for such a long episode as well. One thing I have to ask you though, before you go, it's a very serious question. I'll probably put some dramatic music in the edit. If you could only ever use one brush in Procreate, now it can be your own, it could be a built-in one, for the rest of time, what brush would it be?
I would be very tempted to really make it super hard on myself and pick something like the swordgrass brush or something, some like really weird Procreate brush. Imagine having to draw with that all the time, like portraits, everything. That would be crazy. No, I would pick my own custom brush. I have a brush that's named the Flotastic brush. It's part of my Flotastic brush pack. It's for patrons, and that's a versatile brush. It is slightly textured. It's great for sketching, but also for landscapes. It's a pretty much all around brush, and I think I could manage creating most of the things I like with that brush. So yeah, it's
brilliant.
A tough decision. Swordgrass, Flotastic, but yeah, let me go for the Flotastic brush.
My church would look awful if I only had to use the swordgrass brush. It would look like an awful mound.
fluffy church.
Flo, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I think everybody's going to love having you on the show, having a chat, and we definitely have to get you back on because there's so many topics we can talk about as a community and all the different elements of it. So we'll definitely have you back on.
Yeah, maybe people can let us know in the comments if they want me back.
Absolutely.
They will.
Not assume
Definitely. They will, because no, we get messages all the time. I'll put messages out there and I'll say, who do you want on the show? It's like, I need you to have Flo on the show. I'm like, I'll get it done.
Yeah, well, I hope those people have enjoyed the show. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, James already predicted it will be chaos. Yeah.
As always, I'll leave links to all of Flo's content in the description down below, so you can check out all of the tutorials that we've referenced in today's video, as well as all of Flo's socials. All of our socials are in the description down below. And just like our main subject today, if you've got a question you would like us to answer on the show, please feel free to message us on any of our platforms. But if you want to, you can submit a question using the form in the description down below. You can leave it with your name or leave it anonymous if you'd like us to answer it like that as well, and we will hopefully have it on the show and have it as a featured segment. So as always, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you again next week.